My guest today is a puppeteer, actor, director, and teacher. He has had an amazing career in entertainment, and it is an honor to be talking with him today, the great Allan Trautman. Allan, I see you've been a guest at quite a few conventions lately, so I got to ask, what's it been like for you getting to meet and connect with people who have an appreciation for your work?
Well, it's wonderful. The people I meet are, first of all, invariably just the sweetest people in the world. A lot of them have traveled, 8 hours by car to come to a convention that's somewhat close to them, just so they can say hi and look around and talk to me and ask questions that they may have had for years. And it's great just being able to share stories and say hi and jawbone for a little while. It's really wonderful. I enjoy doing it.
Are there any memorable fan interactions that really stick out to you?
Um, well, it's just that so many people I meet have a similar kind of story to tell where they say, "Boy, I saw your movie in such and such a year, whatever it was. This is what it meant to me growing up, or maybe it led to my wanting to work in costumes or makeup effects or other things like that, or just other practical effects in movies." And it's really nice to hear sort of all these fans' kind of origin stories and how it may have started with one of the things that I did. I hear that more often with Return of the Living Dead, of course, because it's a very intensive, effects-heavy film. But it's that kind of story always kind of resonates with me.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's get into a bit of your background now. You were born in Brooklyn and you later moved to Miami Beach when you were 13. So, what was that transition like for you, moving to Miami Beach?
Wow. It's interesting. I was young enough that I was able to adapt quickly, I think. I never one to make a lot of friends and be the most popular kid in the class. I'm really kind of an introvert, and I always was. But it wasn't too long after landing in Florida that I got into theater. And once I did that, it was like there was no turning back. It was like, oh, I found my people. All the all the freaks and geeks were getting together in the theater department, and I knew that was where I meant to be. Although it was shortly after moving there, I I realized I had never noticed what a strong, thick New York, Brooklyn dialect I had. And very shortly after starting school, I moved in the summer, and I think ninth grade was my first year there. Shortly after starting school, somebody asked me where I was from, and I said, New York. And it was at that point where I realized, oh my God, I know there's an R in there somewhere, New York. Okay, okay. Oh, I don't talk the same way as other people here. And so I was lucky to have a good enough year that I was able to start adapting my speech a little bit so that I could push away some of that New York obviousness and uh, and work toward a more general kind of um, you know general kind of American dialect after that.
You attended Miami Beach Senior High School and you were
Hmm.
taught by the great drama teacher, Jay Jensen. What were the most important things that you learned from him, and what impact did he have on you moving forward in your career?
he was just so empowering of whatever it is you had to offer individually as a performer. Now, obviously not every student of his went on to be an actor, but we all felt like we had a place there, that we could do something that that brought our talents forward. Um, I always remember it being a place where I I could just explore and have fun and be me and bring out whatever natural talent I had to the forefront. And I think he did that with everybody. He also was ahead of the curve in doing improvisational work, which this was back in the early 70s. And at a time when improv was not necessarily being taught as a sort of uh, codified uh, field of study. If you wanted to learn improv at that time, you had to go to one or two or three different places in the country. You'd go to Chicago, learn at Second City, things like that, or Toronto, to learn it. And I don't think there were many high schools, let alone colleges or any other independent programs that were teaching improv. So I had a very early exposure to something that later on turned out to be a very important part of the work that I'm doing. And it was really kind of invaluable.
Mm. Now, other than acting, were there any other things you were involved in during your high school years?
Well, I was always into science and math. I was on a kind of a track I was taking all the AP classes I could, and by the time I got to college, I was like, well, all right, I guess it's time to put away this kid stuff and with theater and all of that and go study physics, which is what my main interest was at that point. Um, and by the of course, by the time I spent a year in college, I realized, no, I really miss being on the stage and doing acting, taking acting classes. So I dove back into that.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, after high school, you went to college at Washington University in St. Louis.
Mhm.
How did you decide to attend Washington University?
Wow, that's a good question. I'm trying to remember what other. I was admitted to a bunch of colleges, and my thrust back then was science. I think I knew at that point I wanted to major in physics. And boy, I really don't remember. I think it had to do with Wash U being having a good teacher to student ratio and things like that. I had a choice of whether I wanted to apply to the School of Engineering or yeah, to get a Bachelor of Science or the College of Arts and Sciences and get a BA. And fortunately, I decided to get the BA instead of going for the strict science degree because it made it easy to take other courses and dabble in other things. And it made it much easier than to add a double major. If I had been in the engineering school, I would have had to have gone back and got a dual degree, which would have been a little when I decided to switch over to theater. But as it turned out, being in the College of Arts and Sciences, I was able to just make it a double major in physics and drama. And turns out that they kind of balanced each other out in terms of what was required and what was needed for things like to fill in your humanities and things like that.
Where did the interest in physics come from?
Uh, I was always interested in science and math. I it was just something that was always, I mean, from a kid, I used to read science fiction books, and I read as much science as I could, really. I was a total nerd when I was growing up. It was, Lord of the Rings and science fiction and uh, Dungeons and Dragons hadn't been invented then, or else I think I would have been totally into that too. But it was just something I was always interested in, as far back as I can remember. Science was just my jam.
And halfway through your bachelor's, as you mentioned, you realized that going into acting would be much more fun than being in the lab. So, of
Yeah.
course, you added the drama major, and then you ended up working on a children's educational show called The Letter People. This was for KETC in St. Louis. Um,
Yeah.
and it was right by the college, which I imagine was very convenient for you.
Yeah. It was really lucky in terms of timing, because I had just decided to add the double major for drama, and I thought I should head up to the theater school office and look at the call board they had there, because they would post jobs that were available in the community, any casting notices. um, and I was like, I just want to do as much acting as I can. And the first time I went up there, there was a casting notice for the Letter People, and it was a children's puppet show, but they were willing to hire voices and train them to puppeteer, as long as they had a minimum of innate talent in the area. As long as they could, you could tell that they could, yeah, manipulate a puppet and do lip sync properly. They were willing to train them in all the other techniques. Um, and I just lucked out, because all through high school, I was a big fan of the Firesign Theater, which they would put out these, four of them played multiple characters and did all these voices. And again, nerd, I would learn these things and just do them. And I learned how to do voices from that. And I was able to go into the audition and do, a dozen different voices for them. And they stuck a puppet on my hand. It was probably the first time I had a puppet on my hand in my life. And I just discovered it was something I could do, that I had some kind of, and I got cast in the show. We did 60 of these 15-minute episodes all throughout the last couple of years of college for me. I think it was probably over 3 years. I forget if we started in 73 or 74. Um, but I would skip class every Friday to shoot the show when it was in production. And it was a great experience. I look back at some of the clips now and I'm like, oh God, I didn't know anything. But on the job training is probably the best training you can get, because you can't fool around and you're learning exactly what you need to know. It was a wonderful experience.
What would you say are your fondest memories from working on that show?
It was just the the camaraderie. I had known what it was like being in a theater production, how you grow close to people working on the show. Uh, but working on the letter people was even more like it was even more intense. There were a couple of other students, other WashU students who were from the theater department who were on the show. They were a couple of years ahead of me. Um, so I know I probably wasn't past being a sophomore when I started on that because I really looked up to these other two folks. Um, so but it was the just the feeling of wow, we're all getting together to do this one thing. Um, I learned very quickly how, in the theater, you've got tomorrow night to try and get it better. You're always trying to improve things even after the show opens. But I learned very quickly on doing a TV show that once it's committed to film or tape, you're moving on, and that's the end of it. And it's like, oh God, did I really do everything I could have to make that work? I would watch a playback and it was like, okay, I guess that's good enough, but maybe not, you know? So it was a great lesson about making sure you do your homework and you get everything on tape that you can as quickly as you can. It was an interesting skill to learn.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, after your undergraduate years, you did graduate work at Cal Arts. And while
Mhm.
you were there, you actually met your wife, which is amazing. So, I mean, safe to say your time at Cal Arts, definitely made a lasting impact.
Absolutely, yeah. And again, it was a chance. So I got my MFA in acting from Cal Arts, but it was again a real chance to just work through all of the techniques and through everything you could do to make your contribution to a theatrical piece as much as it could be. I just remember working constantly, being in one theater piece after another, and that kind of experience is just invaluable. Uh, Working nonstop, learning new techniques along the way to try and make it as good as you can was really a great experience. And yeah, I met Diane there. We didn't start dating till a few years afterwards. I graduated in '78, but we didn't start dating till '81. But again, we came out of Cal Arts with a tight-knit group of friends. We all were very supportive of each other, trying to find work out in the big in the big world here in LA. But it was great experience, and we were all good friends. And staying her friend eventually led to us dating. So that was really wonderful.
Yep, yep, yeah, yeah, yeah. There you go, right? Yeah, yeah. The rest
Yeah.
was history.
Yeah.
Now let's get into some of the other projects that you've worked on throughout your career. And we have to talk about your work, as we were talking about before we start recording, on one of my favorite theme park attractions, Muppet Vision 3D. This was your first job with the Jim Henson Company. And just what does it mean to you to have been a part of something that is still entertaining millions and millions of people every year?
I can't believe it. In fact, I wasn't sure it was even still open out in Florida. I think that's where it premiered at first at or maybe it was Walt Disney World. Um, yeah, I can't remember where it premiered first. But it's great to know that something like that lives on. Of course, it's one of the great things about working in the film and TV industry things come around and they never really go away. Some things do. Some things are harder to find than others. But the having worked on that, first of all, obviously, I got to work with Jim Henson on the last thing that he was working on before he passed away. So I was very lucky in that sense. Um, and the reason I got to work on it, and a number of other people here in LA got to work on it, or got their careers started on that with the Jim Henson Company, is because a lot of the work that they had done that the Henson Company did before that was either in London or New York. New York was Sesame Street, and then London, The Muppet Show, and their movies. A lot of the movie work was done out there before that. This was 1990, the very beginning of 1990, when they were in talks with Disney already to purchase the Jim Henson Company, or at least purchase the Muppets as a property. They weren't purchasing the whole company. They were going to basically buy the Muppets and bring them over to Disney. And while that whole thing was in discussion, they had already jump-started some projects. There were already walk-around Muppet characters at the theme parks. Um, and the other thing was Muppet Vision 3D. And so that was being done. Obviously, they were shooting some of that on location in Florida, but the big finale sequence needed a big soundstage, and they moved production to the Disney lot here in LA, in Burbank, to shoot that. So Henson needed to audition, and it was a big, huge puppet production number. So they needed to hire, I think it was something like 25 local puppeteers in addition to their core group of LA of Muppet performers, core Muppet performers. So I was very lucky to be able to get into audition to that because a friend of mine, his wife was choreographing the walk around characters in some of the dance productions that the Muppets were doing in the theme park. So he knew about this and he shanghaied some of his friends and was able to get them in to audition. So I was very lucky to get an audition for that. And I got hired, and that was my entree into the working with the Henson Company, or working with Jim Henson. And I'm just grateful that it happened while Jim was still alive, that I got to work with him.
Do you remember what it was like the first time you saw Muppet Vision 3D yourself?
Yeah, in fact, I got to see some early sort of test screenings because in Muppet Vision 3D, as you know, but for those who don't know, the 3D movie is only part of it. There are audio animatronic characters that pop up in various places. There are live characters that run around. Sweetums is live. I don't know, is he still doing that live?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, okay, great. There are, uh, and all of those animatronics, there's an animatronic Statler and Waldorf that are in the audience. The whole thing looks like the Muppet Show stage that they're on. So to do these early test screenings, they wanted to simulate what the final show was going to be like, but they hadn't finished building or programming the animatronics yet. So we would perform Statler and Waldorf live, along with a couple of other puppet characters, throughout the movie. We would just pop up like the animatronic would do, and it's all been pre-recorded, and we would just, lip sync to the pre-record just to give all the studio brass and the filmmakers the chance to get a feel for what the show was like. And so I was doing, I forget if it was Statler or Waldorf, but me and a friend were doing um, those characters. And there were only four of us from the LA puppeteers chosen to do this. It was and that was a chance to work with Jim on a much smaller scale, and that was really exciting. Um, but I got a chance to see the early versions of the script, and it went of the film. It went through a couple of different versions because the final version was done after Jim passed away and Frank Oz had taken over and did a different cut, uh, slightly different cut. So it was interesting to see some of the changes that were made uh, as it went on. But it was so much fun to watch. I still love watching it.
Hmm. And like I mentioned earlier, this was the first project you worked on with the Jim Henson Company. When you were working on Muppet Vision 3D, did you have any idea that would lead to so much more?
Well, I had my fingers crossed. While I was working on it, um, all of the LA puppeteers were trying to sort of make their mark with the company. And in fact, Richard Hunt, one of the core Muppet performers, was essentially in charge of doing the scouting for new puppeteers because they had a feeling that they would be doing a lot more production in Los Angeles and needed to start bringing LA puppeteers into the company. So they had set up a in the studio there on the soundstage a big mirror, one of these big floor mirrors, and they had a bunch of extra puppets, and we could go in. We could just when we weren't filming something, when it wasn't shooting, when it was quiet on set, otherwise, we would go over to the mirror and just fool around and improvise and show off so that we could get noticed. And I just remember lots of people just kind of hog in the mirror and be in there all the time. And I just sort of like I'm not one to like um again, introvert. So I just went in there and I did like 5 or 10 minutes. I just did as short as I could. I felt like, all right, did I make my mark on here? Did I do enough? Who knows? Probably great. And I left. And the next day or whenever it was, it might have been the last day of shooting. I was just sitting on an apple box and Richard Hunt walked by and then he stopped and he doubled back and he tapped me on the shoulder. And he said, "Oh, by the way, Alan, I put in a good word for you with Jim." And he walked away. And I was like, I was just floating off of my box at that point. And so that was the only hint I had at that point that I had accomplished something in terms of, making my mark. And then, it was a year later that I got a phone call to audition for Dinosaurs. So that's when I knew it had paid off.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And and of course, as you mentioned, you're very well known for your work on Dinosaurs. It was an ABC sitcom, and it was one of the last projects that Jim Henson had conceptualized.
Yes.
In this show, I mean, it was really ahead of its time. It wasn't afraid to dive into topical issues. So just how big was it for you to be involved in something that was willing to talk about important subjects?
It was crazy good. First of all, I'll say two things about that. First of all, we all knew at the time we were shooting it that this was something different and special. And this was, for me, I was like, okay, I could tell already this is going to be one of those peak career experiences. that it would be difficult to top this. Now, I've had some other jobs that matched it in various ways, but this one was my first um, major network prime time sitcom series regular job. So it was a big deal for me. This was on ABC at a time when there were only four networks. Fox was just starting out, I think. I think Fox was on the air already because The Simpsons were like brand new. Um, but they weren't big like the big three. So being on a major network show like this was, for me, a whole new orbit, in terms of my career. Um, and at the same time, we knew that the writing on this show was just superlative. It's just top notch. Not only was it funny, but the shows were about something. Um, they took on, even now when I watch them, since they started running on Disney Plus, um, we watched all 65 episodes. We just worked our way through the entire thing over the course of a year or so. And I was like amazed at how topical and relevant the stories still were. The topics they chose to write about back in the early 90s were still relevant today. And in some cases, I'm like, man, that's really unfortunate.
Mm.
We were hoping, yeah, man, we were going to tackle this subject and hopefully it'll be cured, you know. But here we are, 30 years later, whatever it is, and we're still dealing with the same social issues
Mm.
that we talked about in Dinosaurs. And the jokes are still relevant. They still make sense. And uh, we were discussing things back then that it wasn't even on other people's radar, at least not in terms of large popular culture. Things like cultural appropriation. Nobody was, talking about that on a platform this big back in the early 90s. It was a known thing, but it was like only, lefties talked about it among themselves. So that was uh, thrilling to be able to work with that. We knew we were like right on the edge.
If Dinosaurs was revived in 2024, like this year, what do you think it would look like?
Oh my God. Well, I hope they would do it with animatronics instead of CG, but who knows? It might look interesting with CG also. You could certainly do things that you couldn't do with animatronics, but um, it certainly has a charm. And I got to tell you, I think it still works. It
Mm.
once you just push that thing downhill, it takes on a momentum of its own, and you stop thinking about all of the mechanics of it and the fact that there are people in the suit or whatever, and you just don't think about it anymore. And so I think if it were done today, I would love to see it done as an animatronic. I hate to to want to put anybody inside those suits because they were just awful to be inside of. But um, I think it's the right way to do it. I was lucky on the show not being inside one of the suits. I was, my main character is Fran, but I was Fran's puppeteer. So I just did basically everything from the neck up. So I had the easy job. Um, but man, that'd be fun to do.
Yeah. Now, after Dinosaurs, you worked on another sitcom. Now, this time, this was a show for a new network at the time called the WB. Of
Hmm.
course, I am talking about Unhappily Ever After, where you were the puppeteer for Mr. Floppy and
Hmm.
also played various other characters. So,
I
how did you
did.
get involved with that show?
Mm. Again, I was very lucky because two of the producers from Dinosaurs were working on Unhappily Ever After. And so they knew, I don't know, maybe they were hired because they had worked with puppets before, maybe not. They were two very funny guys. Um, uh, and they basically just gave the producers a list of a couple of names of puppeteers to bring in to audition for Unhappily Ever After. It wasn't a very long list. And um, I, I don't know where I was on that list. I don't know if they called me in first or not. But I went in thinking it was an audition, but I didn't even pull the puppet out of the bag. I was just we just talked for 15 minutes. And I said hi to the guys. Oh, hey, yeah, thanks for bringing me in. I had no idea that that's why I was there. And then it turns out that their main director, Jerry Cohn, uh, was somebody I had worked with in the theater world in LA when I was doing small 99-seat theater in Los Angeles. And he was just starting his directing career. He came in and it was like, Jerry, what are you doing here? So I'm sure that may have helped that he could sort of vouch for me, you know. So it was a great audition. I had a little trepidation about it because I was like, well, I'm not doing the voice on this character. You know, they brought in Bobcat Goldthwait to do the voice. Fortunately, it was all done live in front of an audience. Uh, but I was like, this could turn out to be a really bad situation for me where I'm just stuck in this couch with no say or no creative input really, other than just lip syncing whatever is going on. Turned out to be a completely different experience. It was really wonderful. I decided to take it because it's like it's too good to turn down. You know, it's another series and it's steady work. And when you're an actor, it's that steady work is very enticing. And I'm ended up being very glad I did it.
Yeah, and you and Bobcat really came together to bring that character to life. Do you have any specific memories of working with Bobcat?
Oh yeah, Bobcat is one of the brightest, sharpest guys you'll ever meet and funniest. He's absolutely hilarious to work with and a sweetheart of a guy. Um, we had lots of time to sit in the dressing room together and not do much of anything but talk. And we had a lot of good times. Um, and it's interesting working together. We came up, first of all, he was not the kind of person who said, I'm just going to get up and talk and just follow me. And that's the end of it. He didn't want to hear anything else. It couldn't have been different because, first of all, he only came in on the shoot days. So we would with, you know, this was shot in front of a live audience. So the way that's done is for 3 days, you just block like you're doing a theater production. You just rehearse and block and rehearse and block. There's no cameras or anything. You're just finding the scene work and you're working your through way you're through the scenes. And all of those times, I'm just performing the character. I'm memorizing the lines and delivering the lines. And so I was able to contribute all sorts of little bits. I would you come up with little lines, little bits of business, little things. I was a full creative partner, and it felt good. That's what I was used to doing as a theater performer. Then on Thursday, they do camera blocking and they just work their way through and they try and figure out where all the cameras need to be and the cutting. So it's a very technical day. And but they do end up taping the whole thing as a rehearsal. Then on Friday, Bobcat comes in, and the first thing we do is watch the tape. So he learns the bits that I came up with. Anything that works, he would keep. Any lines that he thought, were good, he would formally pitch. Um, and then he would come up with his own stuff that we would add on to it. And it was a real collaboration. And it was actually kind of fun working in front of a live audience simultaneously. I had never done something like that before. The audience did not see him. He was behind a curtain, but he was performing live with a monitor, just like I was, watching the stage and watching the camera shot. And after a couple of episodes, we were able to um, just the timing just sort of fell into place. After a while, I'm not following him, he's not following me. We're both just looking at the character and following the character. It's a really interesting uh, amalgamation of the two of us. It was a lot of fun to do.
Wow, that's awesome. That is
Yeah,
awesome. And you
yeah,
mentioned the audience. I must say that on Unhappily Ever After, you got to perform in one of, I think, the rowdiest studio audiences I think I've ever heard on any sitcom. I mean, they got super into the show. It's like they're almost kind of a part of it in a way.
yeah, kind of. I mean, that's the fun. Every show that's shot in front of an audience has a warm up, and they really try and get the audience going. So this one just they certainly didn't discourage it, and it was written that way, because you could tell when the audience, just from reading the script, when they wanted the audience to react certain ways. Um, so it was fun. It was a lot of fun doing that. Yeah.
And like I mentioned, you weren't just the puppeteer for Mr. Floppy. You played these various other characters, right? Like the high school principal, a French bird
Yeah.
critic, a paramedic, a teacher. I mean, all these different characters. And you really got to showcase your acting talent.
I can't believe that they did that. Most shows, first of all, if they bring in an actor to play a certain role, they don't want him playing other roles. They want to bring a different actor in because they sort of like to keep the world intact or whatever it is. I don't know. But they didn't bother with that. So I came in as the I guess it was a vice principal on a number of occasions, and then all these other weird characters they would have me too. I was like, I don't know why they kept doing that. I loved it. Uh, first of all, I got a separate contract for doing all of those. It wasn't like I didn't get paid anymore because I was already performing. They were paying me like they would pay another actor. So I got two paychecks in for each of those shows. And I was like, are they just didn't want to bother going through a casting process? Or were they lazy? I don't know. Whatever it was, I was very thankful for it. And it was nice to be able to play around like that and you know, get back in front of the camera again because it hadn't been too long before since I had actually done that. I had actually worked on their previous show, the Married with Children,
Mhm.
just as I did a one episode guest thing. It was just like one scene. And so I don't know if they remembered me from that at all, or probably not. But I wasn't going to look that gift horse in the mouth. I had a great time on Unhappily Ever After.
Yeah, I wonder if in the Unhappily Ever After universe, I wonder what the explanation is for so many different characters looking the exact same.
Yeah, I don't think they ever got any letters about it.
Yeah.
It was a show with a talking bunny, so it's like what they never really worried too much about breaking the fourth wall in that sense, you
Oh,
know.
oh yeah.
They were always sort of letting the audience in on the joke. It never took itself too seriously. They would always make jokes about how from one season to the next, a character would disappear. One of the
Yep.
main characters, you know, they would, okay.
And the series finale, it's really something else. I was watching it the other day, and Mr. Floppy dies and then comes back to life at the end. And the part that always gets me is you have Jeff Pearson and he's like drinking beer on the couch in the last scene, and then Mr. Floppy, his heart starts beating, and then he comes back. I think it's just a kind of a sweet ending to the show.
Yeah, it's kind of like reversing the ending from Dinosaurs, where everybody died. And also, I
Yeah.
have every show I work on, everybody has to die at the end, it seems. So in this case, they were able to, nobody wants to see a downer of an ending. So
Mm.
again, they know their audience. It's like, let's just bring them back. Let's be true to to Jeff Pearson's character also, who's essentially a loser. And by the end of the that episode, he had become a successful businessman, against all odds. And it's like, yeah, that wasn't ever going to last.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you know what happened to the actual Mr. Floppy puppet?
I have one of them. There were more than one. There were, I have what we call the B head. The A head was the original head, and it was actually quite malleable after a while. It was made of something that I could, it's almost like it was like a cardboardy kind of a thing that once I broke it in, I could make actual expressions in the face, kind of like what Kermit does. Not that much, but a little bit like that. Um, and then uh, we second season, uh, once we knew there was going to be a second season, I said, we really should have a backup head just in case something breaks. We got an audience, we got that, we can't just wait and go into overtime till 2 a.m. While a puppet's being repaired. So they agreed, and they commissioned a second head. While we were doing it, I asked for a couple of other mechanisms, like making the ears go up and down a little bit, and improvements on the eyes. But turns out that once I introduced that head um, to the producers, they preferred the original. So we stuck with the more basic A head. And when all was said and done at the end of the production, uh, I went home and didn't take anything. It was years later that a friend of mine, Kirk Thatcher, was in some executive's office and he saw the Mr. Floppy puppet. He must have been at Disney or something. And he said, "That's Mr. Floppy." He said, and he basically just asked him for it to give to me. And he said, "Sure." So this one, I don't know where the A head went or the A body. There were a couple of different bodies that did different things. One that was designed to sit in the couch, and one that was for other things. But I ended up getting a complete Mr. Floppy with I think it was the B head. And it's just sitting on my shelf downstairs now.
Oh, that's awesome. Wow, that is
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah. I don't know what executive that was or why he was so willing to part with it, but I'm glad he did.
Yeah. Now, as I mentioned at the beginning, you're also a teacher, and you've taught at College of the Canyons since 2007. So, how did you get into teaching?
Um, Again, by accident. Um, I have a master's degree in theater, so that qualifies me to teach at the community college level. So at some point, this was 2007, um, who was it? Oh, it was Patrick Bristow, who I had met through Puppet Up. This was since 2005 over at Henson. We had been doing this training slash show, which was a combination of improv and puppets, puppet improv, improv with puppets. And Patrick had been asked by a friend of his who was a teacher at College of the Canyons to teach improv there because they were losing their improv teacher. Um, Patrick didn't want to do it, but he recommended me. And turns out College of the Canyons is right here where I live. It's like 10 minutes from my house. So I said, all right, let me go take a look. And I auditioned. I didn't audition, it's not an audition, but you go interview. And I got the job. So first year I taught improv, and then eventually we added some other classes. And then I started teaching more online because uh, I was every time I got called away to work, I would have to, I couldn't teach. I have to go off to Vancouver or whatever it is for 3 months. So I just started teaching online, where I could do that anywhere, even while I was working on a job. I haven't taught now for a couple of years uh, because, well, with COVID, they've really cut down on the number of sections they're teaching. But that's okay. There are a lot of other teachers who are very good who are on the roster there at COC. So I'm glad for them to be doing the work. And honestly, I was getting a little tired of teaching online. It's just kind of cold and not as effective as being in person.
Mm. So, I mean, when you're teaching, what do you find most rewarding about that experience?
It's the interaction with the students. It's just being with, a bunch of bright students who are interested in the subject. In the theater department, when you're taking the acting classes and things like that, you got students who are really motivated. Nobody wants to look like an idiot when they get up on stage. Same thing with improv. Everybody wants to look good. It's a little bit different with the survey classes. I was teaching a 110 level class, a 100 level class uh, that had no prerequisites. That was more of a sort of an elective that anybody could take. So a lot of people just assumed it was an easy A. I didn't do that. I didn't just hand out A's, so I got a reputation for being really difficult. But again, it's just I just love the subject so much. It's being able to have these discussions and light a fire under some students that they might not have had otherwise. That's really the most rewarding.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, last question here. For anyone who wants to become a puppeteer or an actor, what's the biggest piece of advice that you have for them?
Wow. First of all, the industry is completely different now from when I started. I I mentioned this a couple of times how lucky I was at certain points to get a phone call from a friend who knew somebody. But I'm also lucky in that uh, I was white and male and straight and cis when I got into the business in the 80s, when the industry itself was full steam ahead. Everybody was making money in the industry back then. And it was easier to get a toehold on things back then for me. I was in the right place at the right time with the right attributes. Um, I realize how much more difficult it is now. First of all, with the internet, you're competing against everybody in the world essentially. Whereas in back then, you're only competing with the people who are as industrious as you are, driving around handing out your pictures and resumes to casting agents and things like that. Um, so the mechanics of it are a lot different, but some of the basics have never changed, which is just work as much as you can, do whatever you can. Today, obviously, it means if it means having your own TikTok channel or your own YouTube channel, then do that. If otherwise, if it's being up on stage, just audition for everything that you can. If you're good, if you're talented, eventually people will realize that. Um, know who you are, know how others perceive you. When you go through theater training in college, it's always about broadening your ability to do multiple kinds of roles, uh, finding your neutral so that you can uh, play any kind of character. But the fact is that when it comes time to making money at this, um, types count. Now, I'm not saying you need to limit yourself because there are as many original types as there are people in the world, and there's always room for one more. But you have to first know what it is you have to offer that's unique. It's not an easy thing to do. And I'm not sure I can give you a formula for doing that other than having a good group of close-knit friends, maybe, who can be honest with you. You know, that's a good thing to have in life as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Completely agree with that. Well, thank you so much, Alan, for giving me some of your time today. I mean, getting to speak with you has been truly an honor. It's been a great experience, and yeah, just thank you so much.
Oh, my pleasure. I had a good time. It's always fun talking about myself.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Of course, absolutely. Yeah,
It's the one subject I know something about, at least.
yeah, yes. Like seriously, just once again, thank you so much, Alan. Getting to talk with you, it's been awesome. So once
My
again,
pleasure,
thank you so
Sam.
much.
Thank you.